We're all set for tonight?
Very good.
That would be nice to have. Okay, you're good to go, buddy.
Okay.
Use it.
We'll call the meeting of the Metropolitan District's Board of Finance. This is a special meeting, Wednesday, September 27, 2023. Are there any public comments relative to agenda items? Any public comments relative to agenda items? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 3, approval of minutes of September 6th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item number 4 is a discussion of the 2024 district budget. We have Bob Barham here along with us tonight. Now, just want to make sure everybody understands that the budget will be officially transferred to us next week at the district board meeting. That our staff is going to make a presentation on what they've put together, and certainly if we let them get through the whole thing, if you have some questions, we could ask them tonight, but the details are not here yet. This is an overview, Bob, if I'm correct, and you know, any specific questions, we should probably wait until we get the whole thing, but if you're willing to answer some questions, I'll let people ask them, Bob, as long as they're not, you know,
Yeah,
detailed, you know.
if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Bob, before you start, you want to just mention the letter you sent to the towns today? You want to mention the letter you sent to the towns today, inviting the town managers and,
Oh, yeah,
finance?
sure. You know, we will be meeting with, as we have every year, meeting with the town staffs, the CEOs, town managers, or finance directors, whoever they choose to attend. That's scheduled for tomorrow. We've done that each year so that they, first of all, get a look at the budget right away. And then we'll have, it's a workshop session, so they can ask questions and stuff. And then they will also be invited back again. If you look at the schedule, they'll be coming back again with any specific questions or anything that they have. In the past, I've sent a letter out just advising them, first of all, that we look forward to their participation in it, because I don't know if everybody here remembers, but we had some pretty significant challenges a few years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And, you know, their input was critical, and we've sort of kept it at that level and made sure that we have a partnership with them, as particularly in the ad valorem budget, which affects them on a regular basis, obviously. So we sent a letter just advising them of all that, and also sort of explaining the work that the staff has been doing, not only this year, but for the past few years, in responding to some of their concerns from years ago, and continue to do it. So for that, I want to thank Scott and the staff who helped me put the details of that letter together. So, okay, Bob, and like I said, if you know, if a question comes up, we'll let folks ask it from members of the committee, and if it's something that's not detailed yet, that's really all you have to say. We'll come back to it at another time. So.
Perfect. Thank you. If I may, I'd like to recognize the budget staff. We have Sharice Rogers and JP Avenoso, and we have Lisa Remsen, who is retiring after 33 years of service to the MDC. Her last day is tomorrow, and so we'd like to thank her for her service, but particularly thank her for 2 years in a row, a recommended 0% increase in the ad valorem. So thank you, Lisa. So this is great. There are 16 slides, but it includes this picture. So 15 slides of data. They are highlights. I'll only cover 2 or 3 bullet points on each slide. So it goes relatively quickly. As the chairman said, these are high-level overviews. We are producing a budget book that you'll be able to get as much detail as possible. But what we did this year, which was different than other years in response to some of your questions, is we gave you some of the detail that created this budget in I think it was a 4-page narrative supporting a 1-page set of numbers, and that was emailed out to each of you last week. So overview tonight, you had significant detail delivered last week, but you'll have the full budget book here real soon. So let's get started. I guess that's me.
Wow, fancy, Bob.
Yeah, hey, look at that. So we'll just review the budget calendar real quick. We'll talk about how we develop the ad valorem and water rates. We do an expenditure analysis and other revenue analysis, and that helps us arrive at our proposed budget. And then I'll do a little summary at the end real quick. So look at this fly-in. This is today and tomorrow. We're having the Board of Finance meeting. I think my first year here, we actually had the town meeting at the end of September, then Board of Finance, and you guys told us, hey, that's all wrong. We want to hear about it first. So that's why you guys got the detail last week, the summary tonight, before we talk to the towns tomorrow, and that's what you see on the calendar. October has the official referral of the budget from the district board to the Board of Finance. And then you'll meet again at the end of October, so about a month from now, we'll have our second meeting with this Board of Finance, and then the next day, meeting with the towns to let them know if there's been any changes to the preliminary budget that you're going to see tonight. Then in November, like all Novembers, we have a Board of Finance meeting to consider and approve the budget and the rates. We have public hearing, Water Bureau meeting, and then a Board of Finance at the end of the month approves what's going to go to the district board in the first Monday of December. And that's what you see there. Now, behind the scenes, once the district board approves it, we're working to produce the tax levy and publish the ordinance that becomes the budget for fiscal year 2024. So here's our process. 3 key steps. This is a reminder to most of you, but some of you it's new, for determining the sewer ad valorem and the water rate calculations. The first thing we do is determine the operational expenditures. How much is it going to cost us to run the business in the upcoming year? And then we subtract from that other revenue to see, let's say it's $100 million is what it's going to cost to run the operation next year, and the other revenue is about $10 million. Well, that means the remainder, that $90 million, has to be allocated. Now, if it is a sewer budget, it's allocated to the towns in the form of an ad valorem tax. And if it's a water operations, then that balance, how much it costs to run the operation minus the other revenue, that balance is chopped up between the water rate and service charges.
Bob?
Yes.
Excuse me. Can you just give an example of what other revenues might be?
Yep, it's going to be in the
Revenues
subsequent
that come
slides.
directly to the MDC.
Exactly. We'll have that. So I wanted to cover the process first, and then we're going to show you the real numbers and what comes up. So in total operations, both sewer and water operating budgets are going to be about $213.3 million. That's a 4.2% increase. We have this in red for a reason, because you're going to see this 4.2 in red in subsequent slides. So I just kind of wanted it to flow through the presentation. So we have, remember the 3 steps? We identified the operating expenditures for sewer at $102.6 million. And then we subtracted the other revenue of $49.5 million. So that leaves $53.1 million to be collected from member towns in the form of ad valorem. And you'll see in red, that's the same amount of money we collected for this fiscal year, $53.1 million. So it's a 0% or no increase being requested for next year over this year. On the water side of the house, first step is identifying the operating expenditures, about $110.7 million. We identified what the other revenue is, $19.3 million. To the chairman's question earlier, we detail each of these numbers in subsequent slides. But I wanted to show you the 3 steps. So what do we end up? Hey, we know it costs $110 million to run the organization. We know we have $19 million coming in other revenue. So how much needs to be collected from water sales? The balance, the $91.4 million. There's actually 2 pieces for on the water side to that 94, or that balance of $91.4 million. There's a water rate, which we're proposing to remain at $3.80, same rate per CCF as we have in this year. So you'll see in red 0 or no increase. And we're assuming the same consumption at 17.7 million CCFs. And then there's a water charge. And these are the charges we have for domestic, commercial, industrial users. And we calculate that to be about 24.1%. Or $24.1 million, and it is a small decrease. So let's take a look at the expenditure analysis. We just talked about, the first step is determining how much it costs to run the business. Here's what it costs to run the business. The $213 million you saw on the first slide. We ranked the categories, or the major objects, from the highest increase from this year to next year to the lowest increase, or in this case, it's a decrease. And so we have debt, you'll see on the top row, that's going up, looks from 74 million to 82, right about $8 million. I'm going to give you a little more detail in the subsequent slides, but that's the highest. And then you have payroll, the second highest. We have our contributions to the fiduciary funds, OPEB and pension, general insurance, employee benefits, and other miscellaneous expenditures are actually employee benefits and other miscellaneous expenditures are actually going down year over year. So let's dive into these a little bit. The next slides will cover each one of these variances with an explanation. So our debt's going up about $8 million, but really it's only a net increase of $5.3 million over what we paid in debt service this year. But you'll remember when we were determining this year's budget, last year I told you in our capital fund we had $2.7 million. We don't need that fund to have any more money than it takes to pay the bills. And over time, because of refundings and the like, the balance had grown to 2.7. So in this year we had a benefit. We contributed $2.7 million less than what we knew we were paying out, so we would get rid of that $2.7 million fund balance. But what that did is that meant that moving from what we contributed this year to next year is actually an $8 million increase, but it's really only due to $5.3 million worth of additional debt service. Payroll. That's the next highest increase in expenditures, about $1.9 million. we're proposing total employee count of an increase by 9. We'll detail what those positions are. But for this budget, the $213 million, it's only impacted by the operating employees. So we threw in there the capital employees so that you would see the relative change from one year to the next from operating and capital. So in the current year, we had 397 operating, our operating expenditures, 397 employees in the operating expenditure budget and 41 in the capital expenditure budget. And that total was 438 people. But next year, we have a net increase of 2 people to operations and a net increase of 7 people to capital. And we'll detail those in a bit. You'll see in parentheses, it says 9 new positions and 5 employees moved from CapEx to OpEx. So year over year payroll changes totaling $1.9 million. Let's talk about why did our budget go up $1.9 million? Well, the largest part of it you probably already know. Remember, we just finished all our union negotiations. We locked in what the rates are going to be for the next 3 to 4 years, and the cost of living increases and the steps that the employees earn are the bulk of the 1.9. It's $1.6 million. The cost of the 7 new positions is $0.6 million. Remember, we're talking about operations only, not capital. But operations only is about $600,000. We have a $200,000 increase to overtime and standby pay. When you increase someone's 100% our regular pay, their overtime goes up too. The time and a half or double time pay goes up as well. So we had a $200,000 increase to overtime and standby pay. And then the cost, this is an operations look only, the cost of the 5 employees being moved from OpEx to CapEx, I just noticed that the parentheses is wrong in the first bullet. It should be switched. It's a move from OpEx to CapEx. But the cost of 5 employees moved from OpEx to CapEx is saving the operating budget about $500,000. So you see that second hollow bullet saying the cost of 7 new positions we're bringing into operations, and about $0.6 million or $600,000. And then the fourth hollow budget, the cost of 5 employees moving from operations to CapEx. Well, if you add 7 and you subtract 5, that's the net of 2 that we see year over year from 397 to 399. So contribution to OPEB and pension, it is what the actuary had determined, they call it ADC, or actuarially determined contribution rate. And they have assumptions that drive what we have to contribute every year. And this year, we recommended that we not reduce the discount rate. If you reduce the discount rate, your liabilities go up and your contributions have to go up accordingly. This year, we're recommending that the discount rates stay the same, but we still had an increase in OPEB of $483,000 and in pension $235,000. The insurance, we just presented to PP&I a list of all of our insurance coverages, and the preliminary number was about a $200,000 increase. We just We just got an updated number, and some of these are going to change, but not materially, less than $1,000, I think you told me. Yeah, less than $1,000. So these little changes that happen when we get more information is what we present to you in the second meeting at the end of October. So remember the last two categories, we had year-over-year decreases in budget. And why is employee benefits going down close to $1 million? Well, we've had some positive claim experiences in addition to the fact that we cleaned up who's paying for the active employees. Remember last year, we had the situation where we were contributing to the Internal Service Fund for an amount that paid for the active employees and the retired employees under the age of 65. Well, now we're benefiting that. We cleaned it up last year, but we're still benefiting it from that, from the budget last year to the budget this year, by having the correct number of active employees being paid out of the Internal Service Fund. So we're saving $1.1 million there, but that's offset somewhat by the increased contributions to Social Security and unemployment contributions, which are based on the rate of pay, and the rate of pay went up, right? We covered that on a previous slide. So how is expenses? It's going down by about $1.3 million, as you can see here. We did every month you receive a CAO report that lets you know how we're performing against our budget. And we noticed that we were having some significant surpluses. And so we did an analysis on every one of the major objects of expenses to take a look at their trend, their actual spend in 21, their actual spend in 22, and what they've spent year to date in 23, and what we're forecasting the spend to be by the end of the year to determine more realistic or a better budget for the upcoming 2024 year. And that analysis resulted in this $1.3 million worth of savings. It still represents an increase over what we're expecting to spend this year, but versus this year's budget, it is a $1.3 million decrease. So here is the other revenue, and this was the chairman's question, is what are the other revenues made up of? And let's see, what do we have here? We have water on top. We have other revenues going up by about $3.3 million or 20%. And sewer on the bottom, we have other revenues going up by about $5.4 million or 12.2%. And you can see each of the categories. You see this year's adopted budget in the first column, what we're proposing in the second column, and then the year-over-year change on the right side. So this is the high-level summary of other revenue, but let's look at a more granular level. Just going back, remember, water's at the top at $3.2 million with all those categories, and that's what you see at the top of this slide. So let's talk about each of these. The $3.2 million increase is we have a non-operating revenue was the first category that's actually going up $5.8 million. And this was one of the true windfalls for 2023. No one would have been able to guess the amount of interest that would be earned on the money we have in the bank. As a matter of fact, I've said before, if I knew last year how much interest would be earned on our deposits this year, I wouldn't have needed this job. I would have made a lot different decisions. But last year, when we put in the assumption rate for how much we would earn, it's a lot less than what's actually coming in the door. I had no idea the interest rates were going to go so high. And so what are we going to do next year? We're assuming that they're not going to go higher, but we're assuming that they're going to stay the same. So we need to recognize another $5.8 million in interest income. That's one of the other revenues. We had is a significantly lower second place. It's only $350,000. That was adjusted to equal what the trend has been on the water billing penalties that we've been receiving. Hydrant maintenance, the same thing. We had a rate increase from $150 to $155, so we received a little more money, and it's only $56,000 difference year over year. But the use of fund balance, that is something in the prior or in the current year, we had anticipated the Army Corps of Engineers. Remember, this is a non-budgetary impact because we budgeted on the revenue side and we budgeted on the expenditure side. So, one wipes out the other. So it really doesn't have a budgetary impact. But when we're isolating just the revenue, we actually decrease the Army Corps Reserve from $1.2 million to $800,000. Is that correct?
Forward to by 800,000 with $1.4 million originally the Army Corps. Reduced it by 800.
No, because that says 600,000, so it'd be yeah. So, well, thank goodness for our budget manager, because $1.2 million to $800,000 would only be $400,000, right? And this is 600. So sorry about that. So Lisa's right. We had originally $1.4 million in the budget for 2023, and next year it's 800,000. This is in line what Scott has told all of us about the actual billings and how they've been reduced, and we do not believe that the total liability is going to be beyond 800. We didn't want to carry $1.4 million if we know it's not going to be above 800. And so we reduced the $1.4 million to 800,000. That's why you see that $600,000 reduction. And then the contribution from other funds, the internal service fund was really high last year due to a surplus, and we're reducing the amount contributed from that fund this year by $2.4 million. So that's all the non-operating or other revenue analysis on the water side. Just a single slide on the sewer side. Very similar. Contributions from other funds are going up. We're using money from the Accessible Sewer Fund. We're doing a transfer from the Hydro Fund. You'll remember last year when we set up the Hydro Fund, the Hydroelectricity Fund, we said that any revenues we received in excess of the expenditures to operate the the electrical operations, that surplus could be used to give relief only to the sewer fund, right? Only could be used to reduce the cost to the towns and put downward pressure on how much we have to charge the towns in ad valorem. Well, we have an excess in the hydroelectric fund. I think last year I explained when we have an excess, we don't want to take it all in one year and then not have it available in the subsequent year. So what we do is we take the excess and we divide it over 3 years. And then the next year we take a look and see what the excess is and divide it over 3 years. That means the benefit is not so extreme, like taking $4.5 million credit, but then the next year you have to raise $4.5 million worth of revenue because that credit's gone. So we amortize the any surpluses in that fund over 3 years. Yes?
Yeah, Bob, excuse me, but, so is that so contribution from other funds and the hydro, fund itself? So what is the actual net revenue from that? So you had an expense for operating the hydro plant, but then there's a revenue that comes in from it. So what's the net? Is it 3.5 million? Is that what you're saying?
That the, well, you know what? I'll give you in general, but I will answer in detail in an email through John.
Sure, sure. No,
But,
I just.
but to your point, our operating revenues are in fact greater than our operating expenditures, which allows us to take that surplus and benefit the sewer fund.
We're talking about hydro. Yeah.
Hydro.
And originally,
In hydro.
all the hydro had to go to benefit the sewer side. That's the way that it was.
It still does, and that's what we're proposing here, and that's why you see the contributions going up.
My point was only that we do create revenue with hydro. We actually create revenue with hydro.
We are indeed.
And this is at a rate that's pretty low on what we're allowed to charge per kilowatt is fairly low compared to newer hydro installations, which are something in double what we can charge. So I just want to, we're still making money on it, even though it's an older plant and we can't charge as much as newer installations.
No, it's a wonderful question, and when I get back to my office, I'll pull out the detail and provide that. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a history because I'm curious myself, the revenues for the last couple of years, the operating expenses for the last couple of years, and why we have that surplus that we're taking a portion of, a third of it, and contributing it to lower the sewer rate this year. So I'll get that detail. Thank you.
Thank you.
The investment income, remember the 5 million something on the previous slide on the water side? The water has a lot more money in the bank than the sewer does, but we still have the ability to add about $703,000 to 24's budget over what we had this year. And then the other government agencies, we have an increase in sludge revenue. Again, we just looked at what the trends were. We talked with operations on what they anticipate, and we were able to increase the revenue by $500,000. Same with sewer user charges and other sewer revenues to a lesser amount. So that's the detail of the other revenue. Remember 3 steps. Hey, how much does it run the operations? Let's subtract from it the other revenue. And then the balance is going to have to be divided out to the towns through ad valorem on the sewer side and to our customers in the form of a water rate on the water side. So that's what we're showing here. On remember I promised on earlier slides that those 4 red 0% increases are going to be shown on the subsequent slide. Here it is. On the left-hand side, you have it in a narrative form. We're going to collect the same $53.1 million from member towns in the form of ad valorem in 24 that we collected this year. So 0% increase, the first red line. The water expenditure minus the 19.3 other revenue. So that means we have to collect $91.4 million from water sales. How are we doing that? Well, we're going to keep the water rate the same at $3.80 per CCF times the same consumption of 17.7 million CCFs is going to generate most of the money. But, water service charges do bring in about $24.1 million as well for the other part of it. And then when you total everything up, that is a total of a $213.3 million proposed budget for the district's operating budget, which is a 4.2% increase. So that's the narrative to what you see on the right-hand side, which is the 3 steps. Operating expenses minus other revenues gives us what we need to charge the towns on the sewer side or our water rate payers on the water side. So just a summary, and so we're wrapping up. We're doing pretty good, right? A summary is we covered that the total organization's personnel are going from 438 to 447. So 9 total new FTEs being funded, but only 2 of them on the operating budget that is before you tonight, a net of 2. Remember, we had 7 new and we transferred 5 to CapEx, so a net of 2. There's a 4.8% increase in pension and OPEB contributions when we don't change the discount rate. The debt service rose due to the money we raised this year in our bond issue. Remember that really successful bond issue in August? We raised $84.7 million, I believe it was. But when you issue debt in one year, the debt service, the first payment, becomes due in the next year. And so that's what we're seeing here is our debt service costs are going up next year. Now, remember those operating expenditures that we took a keen look at and looked at what the trend of our spending was? That is where we found the decreases in fuel, electricity, chemical costs due to the market conditions. And then we also detailed the use of fund balances and how they've, and surpluses, and how they're contributing or being lowered into the operating budgets of the sewer and water funds. And then we did want to note that, and I'm going to really emphasize this point tomorrow when I have the exact same presentation to the towns, is that the ad valorem, although in total, the $53.1 million is not changing, is that the allocation between our 8-member towns can change. There's a formula that bases it on the average of the 3-year revenues that are brought in by each of the towns relative to each other. And so 2 of our towns don't have their audits completed yet, so we can't perform the calculation. But we will have that. Hopefully by your second meeting in October, I'll be able to tell you how the individual towns' ad valorem payment to the MDC has changed. But in total, 0% increase. And we always like to end up with a comparison of what the water bill looks like. You'll see that last year the water rate went from $4.09 down to $3.80. Remember that 29-cent reduction? It was 7.1%. Well, we showed how the water usage charge was going down on an individual bill, but you'll see for our member towns at the top of the chart, the $3.80 per CCF is unchanged. So there's no impact from 23 to 24 on the water bill due to the water rate. The Clean Water Project charge, however, is going up from $4.25 to $4. Thank you. It's only an 8-cent increase. You've heard Scott talk about the Clean Water Project charge and how we had a plan for our integrated plan and how our integrated plan changed when we prioritized North Hartford projects. But we said with this new priority, we are committing to not exceeding the forecast of the Clean Water Project charge that we presented when we originally developed the plan back in 2022. And that's true. What we originally planned for 2024 was an 18-cent increase. But when we analyzed all the projects we could get done, their cost, where their funding was coming from, we didn't need to increase the rate 18 cents. And so we're fulfilling that commitment, is that even with the reprioritization of projects, we're maintaining a rate that is at or lower than when we originally developed the plan. And that's what you see in yellow. 425 to 438, an additional 8 cents. Last year, I said an average residential usage would be 100 CCFs a year, and you'll see in the first column, that's about 8.3 something CCFs per month. Well, I didn't want to propose a rate increase to the Clean Water Project charge and change that assumption and lower it. But I did want to let you know that we have taken a look at the residential usage, and that usage is significantly lower than 100. It's really closer to 70 CCFs per year. So going up 8 cents times 7 is really only $5.60 additional cost for the year. But just to make our year-over-year presentation, 100 CCFs last year and 100 CCFs this year, we showed it as an $8 increase in total due to that Clean Water Project charge. This is the last slide. This just shows how we remain competitive with the other water suppliers in the state. You could see the rates for 2023. We need to update that slide. It's for 2024. I'm sorry. It says 2023, but we will update the slide for the town meeting tomorrow. But we're at 380. We're regional water. That provides water only to New Haven County is 503, Aquarian is 687, Connecticut Water is 855. But not only do we have that trend as being the lowest cost for all the water suppliers in Connecticut, when we look at the regional water being closest in operations to providing a pure water product, we went ahead and on the right side of the chart said, well, how close have we been for many years? And so we put the MDC against the Regional Water Authority, and you'll see all the way back to 2016, we remained significantly less cost per CCF than our sister company down there in New Haven. And with that, that's the end of our presentation. Like I said, all your town managers or their representatives have been invited to hear the very same presentation tomorrow.
Before we move on here, I want to make sure I asked our clerk before that for the slides that you presented tonight, those have been sent out to commissioners or to members of the Board of Finance or to all commissioners?
All commissioners, they were part of the agenda that was posted publicly. So they were on their website,
So that's,
sent to towns.
those slides we just saw are there. Yeah. I had a question from one of our members that couldn't be here tonight to make sure that they got everything that was here tonight, but they already have it. That's what you're saying. So,
Okay.
you know, is there more to your presentation?
No, that's it. That's it.
I want to, first of all, ask any members of the Board of Finance if they have any questions for Bob or staff. Mr. Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob, nice presentation. I noticed when you opened with a curtain. Is there a curtain number 2 with a different presentation? Soon to
The
be.
budget is anything you instruct me to make, but this is our recommendation.
Could you tell us what 2 towns have not completed their audit?
Bloomfield and Weathersfield.
The only other question I have for tonight, on page 13, it was revenues, and I don't recall the exact title. Other revenue analysis.
Yes?
Where would we find the revenue derived from cleaning catch basins?
Yeah, we don't have that identified as a revenue. It's money's owed to the MDC for I would say, Commissioner, I think we talked about this last couple of times. It's more of like it's not so much we have a revenue stream that we know it's going to be coming in on a regular basis. It's almost like a claim. We have monies we've billed and we have not received that money from the city of Hartford. So how do you handle that, Bob? Is it
Any billed revenue becomes a receivable. A receivable is an asset on our balance sheet, right? But we age our receivables and every year we take an estimate depending on how old it is on what's collectible and uncollectible, and it's put into suspense. It doesn't mean that we won't keep trying to collect on it, but if it's unlikely that we're going to collect it, it's pulled off the balance sheet, but still due and payable. So we do maintain it, I believe, for 15 years is what we're allowed to do in the state of Connecticut.
And as our chairman asked for a detailed analysis on another issue, can you provide us with a detailed analysis going back those 15, 16 years, expenditures versus revenues or revenues?
For specifically catch basin?
For all member towns,
Oh,
cleaning of catch basins.
okay.
I don't want to be specific.
I'm not sure how long we've been charging for it, but I'll
2015.
research it and I'll give you everything that we have. Okay, thank you.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, and Bob mentioned this, but it's really beneficial and helpful, and we've talked about this over the last couple of years. As we've talked every year over the last 10 years or 15 years, we've been talking about how we guesstimate what the water consumption is going to be every year, and we never seem to hit that guesstimate. And over the last 3 years, we're starting to see that consistent. We believe that we have, quote, in a sense, hit that rock bottom 17.7?
Yes, perfect.
17.7.
Just under.
So we've been consistently hitting that, and that really helps us plan and budget because we're not worried or guesstimating about what we think we're going to lose or gain in revenue. So it's very helpful in the budgeting process, is my point.
Any other questions from members of the committee?
Just one.
Sir, go ahead.
Thank you. Bob, on page 5, water service charges, you have domestic, commercial, industrial, and other. And maybe I missed, but what is other?
Page 5.
That's under water number 3.
These are service charges that we assess in these different categories. Domestic, and it's
Parks.
based on the meters. I think it's this one.
That would be parks and those kinds of services, Bob.
It depends on the meter size, is that right? Yeah. And so these are not our residential customers. These are the customers with larger meters that get an additional charge based on the size of their meter. And there's different categories here. If you would like that detail, I'm
Yeah, but,
I'm not sure
Bob,
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, I think other, the category of other is, if I'm not correct, Chris Levesque, where are you? That this would be the category of parks that might have a water meter, or some non-resident facility that would have a water meter. Is that not correct?
Yeah,
Under
so
other.
it's,
Chris, get to the mic, to a mic, Chris.
sorry.
Let me come up to the mic, yeah. Chris Levesque, MDC. So any property, we meter all domestic services as well as some fire services as well. So every month, based on the size of the meter, there's a customer service charge related to that. So that's one of them. Also on the fire protection charge, we charge based on the size of the pipe that's connected to our pipe. So that there's a rate chart associated with that too, and that's based on the capacity they're requiring, and that's represented by the diameter of the pipe.
But the category of other.
Yeah, so, I think that was the 2.4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
The 24.1 million, this is exclusively the water service charge.
Yeah, so the water service charges all our customer services charges.
Yeah.
So that's based on the meter size as well as the fire but I think fire protection's on a different one. Yeah, they also get it as well too. So those are,
Can you give us something on this? I'm not sure
Yeah.
I understand.
but it is,
What other is.
yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah, it's,
It's not
that
one
is
of
the
these-
water
It's
service
actually
fee.
not part of other revenue, it's down here on the
Yeah,
amount to be.
Yeah, I
from
see you're looking
water
at domestic,
sales.
commercial, industrial, other. We really have residential, commercial, industrial properties. Other is, that's a good question. It's not really defined, but that, yeah, it could be parks, it could be municipal buildings as well. So I think it's larger than that. So other is municipal parks, those type of things. So
And
that's
I'm
how it's
hap-
categorized.
I'm
on the
happy
premise
to
level.
run a trend on that and show you what we have budgeted for each, if you want that further detail. That's relatively easy to do.
I just want a clear explanation of.
Yeah.
Of what
other
it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that, sure, thanks.
Yeah, it could be raw water as well, so Ski Sundown is another metered service, but again, those are customer service charges, that's what the 2.4 consists of.
Art.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Nothing else from a committee member? Okay.
Through you,
Mr. Taylor?
Chairman, although I'm not a member of this committee, but I have a question for you with regard to the budget,
Yeah.
and the presentation.
Yep, we-
And my question for you relates to what, if any, contingencies do we have to provide for possible consideration of studies, organizational or otherwise, of this institution that may be instituted, say, at the request or behest of the commissioners? For example, a management study or something to that effect. How would we account for that? Let's say in this budget presentation, if that possibility arises.
It's not currently in the budget that has been recommended. If it's voted upon and the full board requests that it be added, I'll add it and we'll show you what the impact is in our second meeting.
I think that it would go here first, would come to committee, the Board of Finance first, and then go to district.
Right.
So, does that answer your question? Commissioner?
Or for that matter, any committee that wanted to add
Yes.
something and recommend to the board, but ultimately it's the board's approval, right? So,
If I may, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Bob, I had to step out for a minute, but did you go through the items that we need to have consideration? So we talked about, at PPI, we talked about the consideration of lowering the discount rate and not leaving it the same. That was about $300,000. There was the issues surrounding the Hartford $110,000. This was in your last page of your summary. Did you go through those items?
no, I didn't, but we can real quick if you like. The first one is revenues ad valorem
Page
and,
back up.
I'm sorry?
Can you put the page back up so everybody can see what?
Actually, this is what was emailed to everybody last week. It's not part of the presentation, but I can read it to you. There's only 3 revenues and 5 expenditures. So the first revenue is the recommended ad valorem budget in total remains flat, no increases from 2023. However, Bloomfield and Weatherfield have yet to publish their audits from which the split between member towns is calculated. Also needed are the responses from the member towns assessors department regarding prior year tax abatements. Tax abatements are part of the calculation in addition to revenues generated in a given year. So I think we touched upon that already. The second revenue item is the use of the potential Northwest Connecticut Land Conservancy Agreement, estimated at $1 million in water revenue. There is not, the $1 million in water revenue is not showing in this proposed budget. In the use of the potential Glastonbury sale of additional land, possibly $4 million in water revenue. That is not shown in this budget. I would like to say at this point, an operating budget is to determine what it is going to cost to run the operations in a given year and make sure that we have the appropriate revenue to pay for those expenditures. These two non-operating revenues, sale of land, can occur outside the budget process. You don't have to decide. You could decide to sell the land and bring the revenue in. And like on the sewer side where we have revenues, expenditures, and fund balance, on the water utility side, we have revenues, expenditures, and something called net position. It's a rough equivalent of fund balance. You can sell the land and bring the money right into the net position. It doesn't have to be part of the budget process. And then at any time, if you determine a use for that excess money that you just brought in, you can tell me, or you can have a resolution to pay for whatever expenditure you determine out of those surplus funds that were deposited into net position, all outside the operating budget discussion. So the reason why we wrote these things here is there's been discussion of the Conservancy potential money and the sale of Glastonbury. We just wanted to let you know, these numbers that we presented, they're not in there. But certainly it doesn't prohibit you from making the sales, bringing the money in, and at a later date deciding what to do with it.
Thank you, Bob. I don't.
Yeah, and I just want to say, because we're going to be talking at the Water Bureau about this, one of these topics about utilizing one of those revenues if the board were to sell the land Glastonbury, or if we were to receive, and when we receive the money from the Conservancy, Northwest Conservancy, to utilize that to purchase about 160 acres of land, watershed land in at Nepog Reservoir. We're going to be talking about that at Water Bureau tonight. So we wanted to keep track of this stuff so everybody's fully aware of what we're doing. And did you talk about the rate stabilization fund?
No, we have 5 expenditure items. I think they're quick.
Yep.
The first one is there is currently $110,000 budgeted for Metro Hartford Alliance in the district board's account, and it's charged to the utility budget. So I put the account number there, and to let you know that that item was discussed last year. It was discussed again when they asked for an additional $10,000. What's budgeted next year brings them back to what they had originally budgeted this year, which is the 110. There's also currently budgeted for riverfront recapture, and we have that budgeted expenditure in special agreements and programs. There's an account listed, charged to the water utility budget. So that 1.2 million, along with the $110,000, are in the budget that was presented. Final insurance numbers to be adjusted to the PP&I approved premiums. But remember, well, some of you were there, PP&I approved up to a certain level. We're still getting some slight reductions, a few $1,000s here, a few $1,000s there. But I'm about to sign the binders for all of the insurance policies in the next day or two. And so I just want to let you know, in as much as it comes down $1,000, that new number will be presented to you at the end of October. Those are some of the small changes that happen. What I put in the budget is what the actuary's recommendation was to us, and that is that we maintain or keep flat the 6 and 5/8, 6.625% discount rate. Remember, if we would have lowered it an eighth, just like we've been doing the last several years, our liability goes up, and that means our contribution to those funds would have gone up. But the fact that we kept the discount rate flat, it lowered the amount of contributions we have to do next year. We got after the budget was done, we got a last-minute request from Plants and Maintenance. They evidently had a machine they were using to dispose aerosol paint cans. It was either inoperative or people were concerned about the safety, so they made a decision, we're going to engage a third party to dispose of our aerosol cans, and they asked for an additional $24,000. I think Plants and Maintenance has, I don't know, $10 million budget. $24,000 isn't a whole lot to absorb within that, but since it was requested of us, and it's not in the proposed budget, we wanted to make it clear that it's not there should someone feel it important enough to fund. So those are the 8 items that we had for items for discussion.
And if I may, the point on PPI is, I know it came up at PPI about the discount rate. I believe there's still a question at PPI, what do we do? So because we're here first at Finance, we have presented what Becky has represented, but we understand that it may be a discussion point for PPI, whether or not you lower that rate or you leave it alone. So we will, whatever PPI decides, and we'll bring that back to Board of Finance, but for now, that's what we have included for the budget.
I thought we didn't. Well, we did. It did come up at PP&I. But
Yes, it did.
You're saying we hadn't.
There were questions. I think questions were raised by Commissioner Curry regarding the discount rate and should we lower it or should we leave it alone as recommended. So that's.
You asked for a presentation to see what would happen if
Yes.
we.
I think my question was, and it was provided,
Right.
that there was no presentation. This is my recommendation.
Right.
I just want to emphasize that Becky only presents the recommendations. Whatever she recommends is not necessarily what we will approve.
Correct.
But she offered no alternative other than keeping it as it was. And with the information was provided, it's roughly for both about $500,000 increase in contributions.
You know, I didn't bring it with me, but that sounds ballpark. So I remember saying, hey, you give us the detail for the recommendation, but no detail for the alternatives. And so Becky came and provided a detail for 1/8% up and 1/8% down. And then she also, at the very bottom, put, well, remember I told you you could keep it flat and maybe change the amortization growth rate that's currently at 3.5%. And so she did a 3.25% and a 3%. And all of those scenarios also increased it. But what I like about the ADC, or the actuarially recommended contribution, is it doesn't matter how we're funded. If we're overfunded or we're underfunded, if we do 100% of that recommendation every year, we will have sufficient funds to pay the liabilities when they come due. That's the whole purpose of paying them, to calculate this rate. And every year it changes. If you have a bad market year, we're probably going to do a little larger contribution in the next year. Or if we have a really good market year, a little less contribution the following year. But we look at it year in and year out, and we fund it 100%. And I'm comfortable with the recommendation.
I'm just wondering if I could, so if the question or the suggestion is that you need a formal action from PP&I, like a resolution that actually picks a number, or if they can just refer this issue to us. I'm not sure. Do we need a formal approval from them of what they want, or it gets recommended to the Board of Finance anyway? So.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chairman, John Myrtle, because the recommendation was no change, there would be no necessary action to modify it. But for the past 2 years, I think we've been incrementally stepping it down. So for the last 2 years or so, there has been action by PPI to lower it, which then would have an impact. But if PPI doesn't want to make any changes, they don't have to have an affirmative resolution to say the discount rate will be 6.65 because that's where it already is. So that assumption would carry forward until it's changed.
All right, because my understanding is what Commissioner Curry asked for was an alternative to what was proposed by Milliman. And, you know, that doesn't mean we have to accept the alternative or the original, I guess. I mean, and if there isn't a formal action by PP&I, then it's just going to go forward.
I think we took the formal action just by the referral
And
to finance.
just-
That was,
To leave it
in
as it
essence, a
was.
motion that we agree with the recommendation and in a sense approve it. And,
That's the way I understood it. Yeah.
if the number was different and we did the same thing, it would be more formal. But I would only say, Bob, I found it very strange, and I appreciate the numbers, and I'm not looking to change anything. You're telling me our folks down in are fine when we don't decrease it, that baby step. I just found it strange that just kind of skewed the numbers off. No one indicated, would even think on PPI that we would increase, but yet Becky provided a whole column of what.
Well, that's probably on me. I asked to provide an eighth minus and an eighth plus. So, just to show you what the detail would be like on either side of the recommendation, so.
Do we know, just one quick question, do we know what the machine that crushes these aerosol cans cost? I ask that because if we're gonna spend $24,000 for a third party, it's $24,000 every year ongoing.
Yeah.
At some point, there's gotta be a happy medium.
Commissioner, if I may, this is a union issue, grievance related, and without getting into the details, it was in order for us to move forward, we needed to remove that equipment. So if you want to go into the executive session, we can talk about that, but that's the reason why we're removing it.
So I have a question. As long as all the other committee members are satisfied, there aren't any further questions. So Bob, just and this question may not be just for you to answer. So returning to the revenues from hydro. Okay. So it's in the presentation that's going to go to the towns tomorrow, and I'm going to assume that the towns perhaps don't know. Since there, so many changes year after year with, finance directors and so forth, that not all of them are aware of why revenues generated on the water side winds up being used against the ad valorem, to reduce the ad valorem. So my understanding was and this is a long time ago, when we funded the Colebrook hydro project, the submersible, the turbines, that's when that agreement was put together. I'm not sure, but I know that it was associated, because we had to put up capital to build the hydro plants. So my question was, those are gone, right? They've been gone
Yes.
for 4 years or 5 years?
January of 21.
But they've been non-operational longer than that.
No, we had some of them working. There were 6 total, 3 banks of 2. We had the majority of them were not operational.
So what's left is the hydro plant in the Goodwin Dam, not the Colebrook ones.
Correct.
So that agreement, this is a question perhaps for district council. So that agreement extended to the Goodwin hydro as well? That any revenues from that hydro also go against the ad valorem and don't go to the water side? Is that sounds like what we've said?
That's correct. That's what we're using it for, yes.
Okay, so that's what I hope that we can explain just briefly to the towns, how water revenues wind up going against the ad valorem. And the reason for that is, I hope that they'll, once it's explained, they'll understand, because I believe, and I'm going to ask that the staff look into it as we move forward, not for this year's budget, but as we move forward, into the expansion of the hydro that we have at Goodwin. And the reason that I do is, my understanding is that it's permitted under an old permit, which we only get something in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt when it's generated. So Collinsville just built their own hydro plant, uses the same water that has to go through our dam, because it goes winds up in the Farming River, and it's going through their hydro plant. And my understanding is that their revenues are in excess of 8 cents a kilowatt, because it's under one of the new permits.
Right.
And so, I think I've asked this before, why are we stuck at 3 or 4 cents a kilowatt? It's the same water, it's the same hydro, we're not creating any pollution, we're not, so, and I think looking down the road, if the towns see that there's a potential for more revenue from our hydro operation, they might be interested in supporting that as well. It's not an expensive operation, maybe expensive, the capital cost may be expensive, may expensive, but it's paid down from bonding. So it's something that I at least like to make sure they understand. And, also, what are the possibilities for expanding hydro at the Goodwin, at some point in the future? If we could double the revenue we're getting from it, why wouldn't we at least look into it?
We have, Commissioner, we have looked at expanding that. We've actually looked at low flow turbines. We have Francis turbines there, and you need about 90 CFS for them to operate without them cavitating. So we looked at a number of scenarios over the years of adding smaller turbines that would operate on lower flow. The life cycle cost analysis is the challenge. The Rainbow Dam, that facility, I'm not sure they're getting 8 cents, but when we have to pay riparian rights as it relates to our contract, I don't know if that's where the number you got, the 8 cents, but we can talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah,
But we have looked at increasing the hydro facilities at Goodwin over the years.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we talk about the details of
Yeah.
this with the towns and everything. All I'm saying is that I want the towns to understand that how that revenue winds up helping
Sure.
the ad valorem when it actually comes from the water side, and that there are possibilities.
What opportunities there might be, okay.
Revenues from that. And then the second thing was, I think I hope everybody appreciated what you said about the possible land sales, both in Glastonbury and what I understand is already an agreement for the $1 million from the Land Conservancy. They just haven't paid it yet, but.
We're working on the details.
These are extraordinary sources of revenue. They're not part of the budget. They're not on either side of the budget. And as you said, when and if they happen, that'll be the time that we can decide what we want to apply that revenue to. And I hope everybody understands that as well, so.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, commissioners?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not so much a question, actually not a question for Bob. But as we did with the monies owed us by the state, we had already made our decision that it would go into ad valorem. So there would be nothing to prevent us from setting that money aside wherever we would like it to go, even before any agreement and payment is made.
Well, I'm not suggesting there is, but neither one of them, well, the $1 million from the agreement is pretty much certain. We're going to get that. The sale of land in Glastonbury is not yet. I mean, but I think Scott already mentioned that there's a possibility to just buy a piece of land with the.
One of the reasons why.
We have some options already. And then as far as the Glastonbury land is, the last time we sold Glastonbury land, the money went into the pension fund. So the net proceeds from it went into the pension
We
fund.
got beat up badly.
Yeah, and we have, well, you can do
No
something.
fault of our council.
Well,
Well, you can do something that pays dividends in the future, or you can pay this much groceries bill with it. I don't, my preference is to do something that pays dividends in the future, but that's something we can all decide later, so.
I would just, Chris Stone, District Council, we did do that allocation, or that, create that lockbox for the money from on the landfill, but that was, with the understanding that the money that we were not receiving, or if we had received the money on time, in real time, on the landfill, that would have gone towards the ad valorem budget, because it's on the sewer side. And it was, continues to be a significant amount of money that would be realized. As to these monies, now obviously it's a sale of, or it relates to water resources. But rather than tie it down into one particular use, whether it be a use related to purchase of property, or a use related to what you might want to do with, for example, an OPEB contribution or a pension, whatever it might be, it may not be as appropriate here as it was there, that's all. But again, that's for the board.
Wasn't suggested.
I understand, but that's for the board to make the determination. But, and these are as, the state money's recurring. Every year, they discharge, and we should be getting paid. These are more one-time, I won't even call them revenue sources, realization of the value of capital assets.
If there are no further questions, I'd like to move on. We have a Water Bureau meeting scheduled for 5:30, is that correct? 5:30. So item number 5 is opportunity for general public comments. Are there any general public comments?
Judy Allen, West Hartford. Budgets are things I don't understand, so this may have been covered and I just didn't hear it. But I think there's an additional cost to the new sewer lateral program. And if there is, I wondered where that ends up in the budget. And the flat rate for, I think it's the sewer customer service charge, the flat rate. I didn't hear whether that was staying the same or going up or what was happening. Thank you.
If you want to take care of that right now, that's a brief answer for
Yeah.
both, so why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, if I may, just to answer the question, since it's appropriate, the customer service charges are not going up. The house
connections are
the house
capital-
connection is
capital
being
fund.
paid for, as we mentioned, it's being paid for by the Clean Water Rate Stabilization Fund. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we deferred $300 million worth of work. And we're getting 50% grant on the North Hartford project. So that's how we were able to implement that without changing that rate structure that was previously approved in 2022 by the board and by DEEP. So that's a positive win for us, and we identified that in a letter to the towns. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Are there any other public comments? Well, hearing none, I will move on to adjournment, but I think Scott has something he'd like to say, and I'd like to say thank you to Lisa Remsen for her work, not only this year, but for the past 33 years. We talked about this. You came just after I did. You got here I got here in January of '89, and you got here somewhere in '89 or '90 or something. Yeah. So thank you very much. Scott, go ahead.
Yes, and Lisa, when I first got here in 2006, she helped me tremendously. She was down at the wastewater treatment plant. My office was down there as a COO, and Lisa was with me down there, and she helped me tremendously. So thank you very much. And we're happy for you and your family to be able to retire and enjoy your family. We are going to have a little cake in the room right next door here. Real quickly, because we got another meeting coming, but if anybody wants to come in and have a piece of cake and congratulate Lisa, we'd ask you to come in, and I'm sure Commissioner Payne will give us a few extra minutes.
So without objection, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved without objection. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.